Voice acting's always been kind of an interesting thing in video games. Nowadays, it's very commonplace and you find it just about everywhere, except Pokemon for some reason. But back in the 90s, it was pretty remote for video games to have extensive levels of voice acting. You might get the occasional voice clip from a character doing an attack or something like that, and you might have a game like Star Fox 64 with very short and quippy dialogue that was memeable for years to come. But few games had extensive segments or cutscenes where the characters would actually talk to one another and you could hear it. And a large part of that was because it was a massive storage hog back in the day. Another large part of that was because it was generally pretty bad. One of the first JRPGs to feature an extensive amount of voice acting was Grandia on the original PlayStation 1.
We've assigned an elite battalion of our forces to this excavation.
It was also pretty bad, but even having such extensive voice acting in a fairly long JRPG was very crazy for the time. Honestly, it was pretty impressive, and between that and the very nice 2D sprites and working over the models, it allowed this game to age very well visually and overall just age nice. It almost looks like one of those retro revival games in the HD remaster, and I'm pretty okay with that. And the story was also alright, having our young hero with a heart for adventure set out on his journey to discover a lost civilization and technology that would change his world. No, it's not the most creative plot even by the late 90s, but it was earnest in its execution, and while I do have issues with Grandia, it's a game that I think can be worth checking out. And so I'm going to give you my endorsement to play the game now. But you need to be prepared because you're going to be contending with one of the game's top 2 hardest bosses more or less right out the gate. Yep, we're fighting another giant squid. Alright, so let's go over some obligatory lead-up. Our story begins with our young hero Justin going through some dude's shed and promptly getting thrown out and smacked upside the head for doing something really stupid.
So how'd it go? Did you find anything in the shed?
Also, I just gotta point out, Justin has gotta be the most normal name for a 90s JRPG protagonist out there. That's not a diss, that's just kind of a weird observation I noticed. After a whole lot of early game whimsy and wonderful life adventuring, we go through our first dungeon being some ancient ruins with futuristic technology once we get deeper in. Gotta love it. And we receive a massive lore dump to begin the plot, as is necessary for these old JRPGs for their story to actually get going. Well, it's either that or having the evil empire storm in and burn down your home village and kill all your family members, but this isn't one of those sorts of games.
What? What's going on?
We're gonna fall!
I gotta say, the cutscene here is actually very visually striking, especially for something from 1997.
Ever since receiving the blessing of the spirits, the people unyoked themselves of the original restrictions and began to walk along the path of evolution.
Gotta be honest, I actually really like Liet's voice acting. It's not great, but it's got that kind of nostalgic early elementary school educational video feel. You know, we were going through some history video. Maybe that's just me. Honestly, it had me thinking the voice acting in the earliest parts of the game was pretty good, all things considered. No Legacy of Kain, mind you, but it had me thinking, you know, maybe this game's voice acting wasn't as bad as I remembered and as it was memed on. Honestly, that's just Disc 1. Once you get to Disc 2, everyone that's not named Justin or Fina starts sounding like they're drunk off their ass.
Ah, she's here! That hussy woman of Lane.
Don't toy with me. I'll beat y'all to a pulp.
Kinda has the same vibe to me as...
Hey, what the fuck? You got a fucking problem?
But anyways, one big exposition dump, and a but thou must later, we have our main objective of the game, and that is to open the door to a lint and maybe find this mystical lady Liet somewhere along the way if we can. Unfortunately, as we escape, we're gonna get hard stopped by bootleg Char Aznabal, who tells us to blame the misfortune of our birth or something. But luckily for us, we know how this game's weird-ass bridges work, so we're able to make our escape. But as we escape, we run into our first boss fight against the Rockbird. It's very weak and super easy to kill to the point you can stunlock the boss and kill him without taking a single hit of damage. Sadly, I failed to do so here and took 4 whole damage in the boss fight. I'm a failure. Skipping ahead to our next dungeon, we have a boss fight against the uncreative generic enemy reskin, the Orc King, who has a fire attack and can hit you hard with an axe over the head, as well as having 2 minions. Now, rule for these sorts of boss fights is always kill the minions as fast as possible, because the less enemy actions on the board, the better. Otherwise, Orc King is definitely tankier and harder hitting than the tutorial boss fight against the Rock Bird, but that's about it. But I will say, since the boss does last longer and hits a bit harder, this is a good chance for you to utilize Sue's party healing skill. That is pretty cool, and it doesn't require magic.
Come on, puppies! Wrap up! Wrap up! Let's go! Here we go!
And after that, the mine collapses and we make our escape, and admittedly this part probably looked a lot cooler back in the 90s. Finally, we make our way across the sea and have to explore the spooky ghost ship with our new party member Fina in tow, and not only is she one of the best party members in the game, but she's also got the best voice actor in the game, and one of the few that doesn't sound drunk off their ass half the time. But then, as is required for more traditional Hero's Journey style JRPGs, we get our ass walled by a giant squid who's here to make us learn the game's combat or die. So you reach the end of the ghost ship and enter the captain's quarters, and after reading a bit of a book, you get jumped by a giant squid. Okay, it looks a bit ominous, but hey, it's just a random big monster with a regular boss theme playing. Surely it can't be that much tougher. And its limbs have their own health bars, and even the weakest health bar is on par with the Orc King in terms of HP and defense. And since each limb has their own health bar in an old RPG, that means each one acts independently, and it's getting 3 actions in the time most characters or bosses would get to take only 1. Oh boy. What does this mean? Well, a lot of things are going on in the fight, as the left tentacle is a physical brute that primarily focuses on sucking you in closer, which alters your position, which will then allow him to smack you hard in the face or nuke you with shockwave. But it doesn't just draw you in, it also clumps your party members together, which can lead to the deadly combo where he clumps you together with the left tentacle, then follows up immediately with the right tentacle casting Howl, and the main body using laser eyes or perhaps shockwave, which, while not overly common, means this boss is capable of inflicting you with stun, leaving you unable to act, and if it does the combo of Howl into shockwave, and your HP isn't very high and you don't have the best defensive gear, it might just wipe your party, but thankfully you probably won't be seeing that because you should have good armor by this point in the game. Now, the right tentacle may have the lowest HP of the bunch, but 360 is still significant at this point in the game, and while it primarily attacks you using Howl, which is an AoE wind magic attack that does pretty high damage early on, its true threat is the ability to cast All Heal, which restores 100 HP to every party member, which makes this boss that already has more than double the HP of the previous bosses combined even tankier, as it's essentially throwing another 300 HP on the board you have to deal with, and the right tentacle is fast, so it gets to act quite often. And those two alone attack often enough that this can very easily lead to you getting wiped out in the opening turns of the fight, leading to a very high chance of you seeing your first game over screen. And because it's an old PlayStation 1 game, dying means you have to restart from the last save point and sit through the cutscenes all over again. Thankfully, these cutscenes aren't super long here, but for the love of God, do not die to the tutorial boss, or you're sitting through that entire run through the ancient ruins, the narration, and the cutscene with Mullen before you're even able to get back to fighting it. I don't know how you died to the first boss, but just don't do it. The main body is mercifully the simplest part of the Squid King, as unlike many bosses in the game, it's not able to move around the arena, and instead it just charges up and repeatedly casts Laser Eye over and over to keep knocking you on your ass, while also having 592 HP, which is a lot for this point, and increased defenses when both tentacles are alive. Now, the Laser Eye mercifully only fires directly forwards from his unmoving body, but unfortunately for us, this isn't the Trails series, so we can't just alter and adjust the positioning of our party members on command to make it easy to avoid that attack. Now, the path to victory doesn't look impossible, but it's far more convoluted and difficult to traverse than anything up to this point, so the question is, how in Christ's name are we supposed to actually win this battle? Okay, time for preparation. Obviously, as an early RPG, there are some statements like grind levels, but honestly, the stat boosts you get from level grinding are somewhat nominal in the early game, so what's far more valuable is often to find the optimal gear for defense to keep yourself alive, and for offense, it's a bit more of a gray area as each character has multiple weapons they can wield, each with their own skills and weapon proficiencies that can be leveled up. Justin should probably be rocking a sword, and I'm not using an 8-year-old child for her physical prowess with a club, so Sue should probably use a bow instead. However, I do like equipping her with the dynamite because it's a surprise tool that will help us later. Fina is the most interesting, as there's a debate of knives or whips, as her whip has higher damage, a skill that paralyzes targets, and higher standard attack range, but knives can be thrown. I went with whips for this fight, but this will be personal preference depending on how you want to build Fina throughout the game. Also, she has magic and can cast fire magic, and for new players, this will likely be their first time coming across magic in Grandia 1. The fire magic is a small AoE that costs 1 of her 10 MP to use. It's very helpful, but when casting the magic spell, a character is often at their most vulnerable, as they are easier to stun, and if attacked mid-casting animation, before the spell cutscene takes over, they will receive counter damage like it's Bloodborne or something. Very high risk, high reward, but it can be great when you pull it off. However, a mechanic I forgot Grandia 1 even had was magic proficiency as well, where the more you use magic, the better you get at it, so after having Fina cast Burn enough times, she'll eventually unlock the ability to use the spell Burn Flame, which does amazing damage, and spells can be learned in the middle of battle, which is helpful. I forgot this mechanic, but it is very helpful. Albeit, the spells do cost a lot more MP, so you're going to have to decide what's better. Basically, you have to ask yourself, do you want to be economical or do you want to do damage?
Oh, flame burn 'em!
Lastly, don't be afraid to use your stat buffing items on Justin and Fina here and now. They're going to be in your party basically all the time throughout the game, and otherwise they're just burning a hole in your inventory. So now with our game plan in mind, I want to say that victory isn't 100% guaranteed, as sometimes Grandia 1 you can just get unlucky with RNG and take a ton of damage or have a near impossible uphill climb at the start of the fight, depending on what moves the boss goes for in what order. I would say the squid is more or less the hardest part of the game, barring a certain fight in a volcano, mostly because by the time you get halfway through the game, you can get so overpowered that Justin or Fina could more or less solo everything. And yeah, the final boss is strong, but Fina can stun lock it to death. So I would say this is probably about as hard as the game will get for most of its fights. Though, I will also say a large part of that getting overpowered is because Grandia 1 has entirely too much padding for its bosses, but that's an issue for another day. Anyways, the opening onslaught is probably going to be the most dangerous part of the fight, to the point I'm going to make a crazy statement and recommend having Sue actually defend just to be safe. After that, it becomes a matter of deciding if you want to bum rush the main body or take out everything. Now, the correct answer is to take out everything because, while I can understand the value of a good bum rush, that just means the boss is getting 3 actions every turn, increasing the odds that he kills your party members, and revival items are a rare commodity this early in the game, and each character has a separate inventory to manage as well, so if the character with the revival items goes down, you're out of luck. You need to make sure each character is carrying one if you can. On top of that, when the body loses 200 health, the right tentacle will start spamming I'll heal to make it much tougher to kill, as its flat 100 HP is going to be regained every single time that tentacle gets to act. So priority 1 above all else should be to kill the right tentacle first, as it can heal and cast the house spell, so you're getting the most annoying moves off the board, on top of it also being the weakest tentacle, plus when one tentacle dies, it does weaken the power of Shockwave at least a little bit. After that is the left tentacle in the main body, and at this point you can start working on taking down both, but keep the laser eyes and suction attack in mind, as that can be a deadly combo. If you want to stop it, make sure to use either physical skills that interrupt or critical attacks, because unlike most RPGs, standard attacks in Grandia are always double attacks at the very least, while a critical attack is a single strike that's lower. Well, it's slower, but it's more powerful than a single regular attack. Now, why use it if the damage is less most of the time? Well, that's because it has the interrupt ability, allowing you to stop an enemy skills from going off, like the laser and the healing spell, and straight up cancel them. It may take a bit of getting used to the timing, but it can be a very useful skill to keep in mind. Personally, I recommend taking out the tentacle first for the extra rewards and making the path to victory safer, because you're not speedrunning the game at this point. Just take your time and go for. Lastly, it's just a matter of willing on the main body, but keep an eye on your health and his turns in order to avoid the deadly laser attack. If it comes out, it's likely going to be hitting everyone for about 30 damage, which is quite a bit at this point in the game. The best option is for Justin to pick and focus on a tentacle. Sue should play it by ear with more support focused, but spreading damage won't hurt, and Fina should prioritize using Burn and Burn Flame on the main body to hit every body part of the squid for around 70 damage each turn, which is quite good for the early game. And again, Burn Flame, while more expensive, does a lot more damage. In fact, if you have that, this fight is bordering on free as long as you can survive the opening onslaught, but I often don't have it until I get to this boss fight at the earliest. I don't know, maybe I don't use spells enough. Just don't be careless, heal up if HP seems a bit shaky, and be ready to keep fighting, and against all odds you will come away with a victory. Grandia is a very ambitious game for the time, and while its story wasn't anything groundbreaking, I have to give it major props for its presentation. I don't have fond childhood memories of this game because I didn't play it growing up, and instead my exposure to the series was a remote PC port of Grandia 2, which we'll be talking about next week, because I love that game. But whoo boy, that boss is way worse than this squid fight ever was. Unlike some old games I cover, this one is very easy to get your hands on, with the remaster being on basically all modern systems and going on sale all the time for $10. But do know that the game does have some issues outside of the voice acting, as the pacing kind of drags its feet near the end with entirely too many repeat bosses and side arcs thrown in once you reach the second disc. It's kind of a game where I think it's about 10 to 15 hours too long. I'm not kidding, there's actually one boss in the game you fight 4 times. It's not even a major story character, it's just a big monster. Anyways, there's a reason the other Grandia games heavily condense their boss roster, but I'm kind of rambling at this point. You could do a lot worse than this game, and I know a few people that have this as their cozy RPG of choice. So, if this looked at all interesting to you, consider checking it out. That's all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed it, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video. I'm actually getting really close to 10,000, and my goal is to reach it before the year ends, so fingers crossed we'll be able to pull it off. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time when we tackle a much harder boss in this game's sequel. Until then, take care.